Things keep getting crazier for the Toronto Maple Leafs as Nick Robertson, he signed with the Leafs earlier, but a brand new report has dropped from Frank Saravalli revealing some shocking information revolving around a Nick Robertson trade. So to break down what that report is, what it entails, and how this impacts the Leafs going forward. But before I do, if you're a part of the percentage that aren't subscribed to the channel, about 70%, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Habs Digest, Montreal Canadiens, just hit 14K, and we want to approach them and surpass them, so make sure to hit the subscribe button. We just hit 12,000, so thank you guys for that, but help us reach that goal of surpassing Habs Digest. But Darius, we have a lot to get into today, specifically surrounding Nick Robertson. It has been a wild day for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We obviously had the Nick Robertson signing this morning. It seems like Max Pacioretty is going to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. And in lieu of that, there's a few things that are going on here, but a wild report from Frank Saravalli dropped just a couple of very recently. And let's just dive right into it. Despite the new contract, belief is Nick Robertson is still more likely to be traded than open the season with the Leafs. There is still solid interest in Robertson, and it's always easier to trade an asset under control as opposed to an RFA, which helped him sign. So Frank Saravalli is coming out and basically saying the polar opposite of what other reporters are saying and what people are thinking here. So Darius, if he is on his way out, I mean, it makes sense that they would sign him first to get maximum value here, but there's a lot of stuff to go over here. I just want to get your initial thoughts on this.
Now, it does make sense, right? This report, like face value, it makes sense. Is Nick Robertson easier to trade now that he's signed to a contract? Yes, but why would the Leafs ever want to do that? So now we have some conflicting reports because obviously last week we got from CJ that he does not want to be a Maple Leaf. He wants a better opportunity elsewhere. Obviously, somebody's mind can change very quickly, so maybe it did over the weekend. Then we got, some reports from Darren Dreger yesterday about, he wants to sign. He ended up signing this morning and he wants to take the opportunity and play with the Leafs. And he had a good conversation with Brube. And now we have this, that it's, more likely that he gets traded still than stays with the team. Honestly, I feel like, there's a lot of conflicting reports right now, but I feel like the Leafs at this point, the player is signed, right? Like the ball is back in the Leafs court. They don't have to do anything with this player that they don't want to. So I feel like he is going to start the season with the Leafs. He's going to be given that opportunity to, capture a spot on the top six on one of those lines. And I feel like there's no incentive to trade him right now. We heard some reports as well that, there wasn't much interest around the league. Obviously, I feel like there is interest around the league, but it's just not what the Leafs want, right? Obviously in that return. So I still think that he starts the season with the Leafs. I think it's a no-brainer for the Leafs. Now he's signed, right? He can't hold out anymore. All of that is done. So they have no real obligation to him to move him at this point. I think he at this point should still start the season with the Leafs.
Yeah, and I guess a wrinkle to this that we haven't discussed too much was the possibility of him signing and then getting traded. We touched on it briefly, but when he signed this morning, we obviously thought that we were mentioning how your dream has come true, that Nick Robertson is going to start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And now this report comes out, maybe crushing your dreams a little bit depending on what happens here. But we got new reports, and we covered it a bit in our video from our last video, the second video of the day, regarding Max Pacioretty and how he is going to be signing with the Leafs. And since that video, more and more reports have come out confirming that that is going to happen. So in all likelihood, Pacioretty is going to be a Leaf. And as well as Yanni Hakanpää are expected to be next in line for signings with the Leafs. But getting Nick Robertson signed was crucial to avoid the risk of an offer sheet. That is from Darren Dreger. And at this point, I trust Darren Dreger the most out of all of these different reporters. He predicted and said that Nick Robertson was going to sign. He did it the very next day. He obviously said that he predicted that Robertson was going to sign yesterday. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. But at the very least, the fact that they do have him signed is good news if you're a Leafs fan. I agree with you. The trade doesn't make a whole lot of sense if it's going to go down because now he's obligated to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I can see how the value would be higher now that he is an RFA. And we're going to get into a bunch of things here. But he signed, and we mentioned it earlier, like, the Leafs kind of not necessarily robbed Nick Robertson, but I feel like that's a phenomenal deal. I feel like they robbed the NHL a little bit with the deal at 1 year, $800K, just given the ceiling that he can have, and even the baseline production in a really rough season last year. He's still a much better than an $800K player, at least in my opinion, given his projections next season, 99th percentile in goal scoring. Like we mentioned earlier, phenomenal player. But the interesting thing now is that if they do decide to trade him, you would have to assume that if this tweet is true, the offer that they're getting for Robertson surpasses a third-round pick and surpasses the compensation they would have got for him getting offer sheeted and then them losing him in free agency, which bodes well either way, I think, at this point. So great job from Treliving signing him. I do want them to keep him, but it's an interesting point there about the offer sheet. He would have to get a better than a third-round pick, we'd assume.
I think at this point, it's more about how Robertson at this point in time, because he is signed now, he is worth more than he was yesterday, right? I think it's more about that. And if the Leafs were to explore a trade, then it would make more sense for the team to trade him at this point in time than obviously yesterday or a couple of days ago, right? So I think it's more about that than, a trade is absolutely going to happen in the next few days. I feel like, with everything that's happened and everything we've heard about Berube having a conversation with him and what Brad Living said about the player, Nick Robertson, that is, they want this player to play in the lineup. Now, there is a world where, they end up signing Pacioretty, and we know a move is coming because for them to sign Pacioretty to a PTO, we kind of went through it in a video earlier today. It doesn't really make sense to like they have no salary cap space. A move has to come to make that all make sense, right? So maybe the move is Nick Robertson if they feel like they're a better team without him with Max Pacioretty in the lineup. I don't think that's the case. I feel like they should obviously hang on to Nick Robertson, but I feel like all of this is more about Robertson being worth more and maybe they can actually get a trade done now. Whereas before, you didn't know what his AAV was going to be, right? This is, like you said, kind of a steal around the NHL right now because yes, it's only 1 year, but the AAV for this year is like for what he is projected to do, it is going to be really good. So maybe they do have the opportunity to put a better trade together, but I wouldn't say that that's really in their plans. I hope it's not because that still wouldn't make sense at this point in time. I feel like this player is going to battle for a position in the top six.
Yeah, well, Frank Saravalli disagrees with you, unfortunately, and he is saying that he's going to happen. Now, let's take everything at this point with a grain of salt because I believe it was Frank Saravalli who also came out and said, or it was Frank Saravalli or Chris Johnson, one of the two, saying that Mitch Marner had a 5% chance to return to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And here we are, he's going to return to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So there's a lot of interesting, conflicting reports, especially about this Nick Robertson situation. But despite the signing, it would make sense for them to sign him and then trade him if they are going that path because of the contract, him being locked up, and his value as a Leaf. You see here from Darren Dreger again. He was the one who has his ear closest to this situation. He said, well played by the Leafs. Opportunity here for Robertson to stake a claim on the left side. He wanted out. Living explored the market while staying in touch with Nick throughout the process. New coach and fresh start for Robertson. So Darren Dreger is saying this. Darren Dreger said that he hasn't spoken too much on the situation until yesterday when he said that Nick Robertson is going to sign. He ultimately signed, so I'll probably err on the side with a caution with the Frank Saravalli report and kind of go with the Darren Dreger report at this time, saying that, and again, the whole thing here was that Craig Berube is going to give him a fresh start. That was the whole point of his re-signing and the Sheldon Keefe situation. So it makes a lot of sense if they keep him, especially given the fact that he signed. I hesitate to believe a little bit that that Nick Robertson would sign if he still wanted to get, or if he didn't want to play with the Leafs whatsoever, because now he's setting himself up to, if he doesn't want to play with the Leafs that badly, he kind of forced himself into playing with it. So I think at the very least, even if he doesn't want to be here, which I still am not convinced that he wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, but I think he's fine playing it out this season with the new coach to earn a new contract, probably elsewhere next year, unless he really loves Craig Berube.
Yeah, if I was to make a Darius guarantee at this point in the video, I think that Nick Robertson will be with the Leafs this year. I don't think they're going to explore a trade anymore. I feel like they believe in this player, and everything they've said to this point makes me believe that they want him to play on the team and that, he signed the contract to play on the team, right? Obviously, maybe there was a deal in place this weekend, like a sign and trade, but that probably would have happened at the same time, and that didn't happen. So I feel like he's going to play with the Toronto Maple Leafs. The one thing that is for sure is there's still a lot up in the air. I think the Leafs, if everything goes to plan and they sign Max Pacioretty to a PTO and eventually, sign him to a regular contract after training camp, they have 18 skaters right now, or not 18 skaters, sorry, 18 forwards. That's way too many. They're going to have to make a cut here or make a trade, right? So obviously there is going to be movement. Doesn't involve Nick Robertson at this point in time. His value is more at this point in time. So it's going to be interesting to watch, but there's going to be a trade is coming. It seems like they're working on something and it's going to come very soon. So that's exciting to look forward to. And at the end of the day, the way I see it right now, I feel like Nick Robertson will be a Toronto Maple Leaf unless something does not go to plan in the season and he's not performing to what they feel like they need out of him.
Yeah, and that's the big question mark. And one final update here before we wrap up from David Pagnotti. He basically said with just over $400K in salary cap space after signing Robertson, Living has been exploring the trade market in an attempt to free up additional cap space. Moving Robertson is still a possibility. Connor Timmins could be on the way out, is believed to be on the trade block. We also have, of course, David Camp, possibility to be out. So that's going to be the big talking point over the next couple of days. We'll obviously be keeping you up to date with all the news, and there'll probably be some moves, more moves coming very, very soon. So stay tuned for that and definitely hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.